All right, and it's 8 o'clock, so we can start our open our planning board meeting for today, December 9th. We'll start off with a roll call. Go around the table here and then into Zoom land.
Mike Capel, member.
Rich Rita, select board, ex officio.
Lisa Knight, alternate.
Nancy Knight, member.
Wendy Rathgeber, member.
John Racine, member.
Terry Wade, alternate.
Bill Spence, member.
And in
Bill
Zoom land,
Ogden, member.
Rob? Oh, that's right, you don't have, his microphone isn't working. So Rob Wilson is here,
Just wave, Rob.
alternate. Perfect, all right. Excellent. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Let's go and zoom in. Great. I'm gonna mess around a lot with, not a lot, but we're gonna put off the minutes for now. We just have Tara until 9 o'clock. So I want to make sure that we get all that. Just everyone remind me if I forget about the minutes later. Never do that, but you know. So I'd like to start. Jump into, I think this will be hopefully relatively quick. This item on discussing occupation, occupancy, it kind of stemmed from, Rich and I went to the ZBA meeting last month, and perhaps some of you watched it. I believe it was recorded. Anyway, there was a fair amount of confusion and conflation of how the terms were used. And I just wanted to see if there's any way that we can clarify, because of course we have the concept of a home occupation as a business. And then we have occupancy, which is like a designation of living in a dwelling. And then there's just a general English use of the word, where if there's, you know, in the case of the ZBA meeting, it was about an accessory building. Of course, we don't have detached accessory dwelling units in town. The question was if this could be, well, the exact question was about setbacks for it to be a potential dwelling unit. But of course, we don't allow for the dwelling units. But in its previous iteration, it was a workshop where it was occupied during the day by someone doing work. So there's a lot of conflation of occupied, occupation, occupancy. And I just wanted to, first off, make sure everyone on the board is really clear about how we're using the different terms. And then I'd run it by Tara briefly just to see if there's any way that we can be more clear in our zoning. I kind of went down a little bit of a rabbit hole myself, and maybe I just need help getting pulled back out by everyone else. But that's the reason for this little thing. Tara, did you have any thoughts on that overall, with any way that we can make this more clear? I mean, perhaps it's just that those of us on the board spend a lot of time looking at the wording and understand it, and perhaps another entity that doesn't take the time won't necessarily understand the differences as well.
Yeah, I did do a search for both terms, and to me, they look clear in the home occupation versus occupied or occupancy. I think where there's room for clarification is where we talked about an unoccupied accessory building can be 10 feet from the neighboring lot line. And when you raised the question, I thought, well, I'm not even sure that I know what that means. Does it mean you could have a workshop in it, a home office, or is it just something for the storage of things? And I thought when you guys were working on that a previous year, that I thought of it as meaning it could be for the storage of things, or a greenhouse or garden shed, rather than, you know, you talked about it could be a garage, but can it be a workshop? And I think the easier way to clarify that. And I'm not sure it's something you can quickly do for in the timing of this town meeting, or if it's something to talk about next year, would be to either add some language to that or use a different term than unoccupied.
Can I ask a
So-
question?
Just to clarify, this part that Tara's talking about now is page 10, under LDR, EII.
And it's in several districts.
This is my question.
Yep.
Can we do regulations like you can do, for example, what they do for ordinances? And you have ordinances, for example. After the
Yes.
ordinance, they are allowed to do regulations which clarify the ordinance.
The way the town
I'm just asking the question.
So the answer is no.
Well, that makes it easy.
I'm gonna clarify it, that's a zoning amendment, and I
Okay,
think this is an area where it could use clarification, because I think what an unoccupied freestanding accessory building no larger than 150 square feet maybe isn't quite clear what unoccupied means there.
the way that
That's what it's meant to mean. but-
the way that the town has approached occupancy is a way that's been doing for many, many years, which is that it is a building that could be potentially have occupancy if it has water and sewer. Otherwise, it is not considered a building that could be permitted for occupancy. And that was part of the question and part of the difficulty that the ZBA was having at the meeting,
Yes,
because the applicants who ultimately pulled the application during the meeting had been rejected by the town when they went to get water and sewer hookup to this building, so that it could be considered a building that could be occupied.
Rich, if that's a building code issue, that's
Right.
that's separate from the zoning, and I think this could be cleared up from the zoning angle by using some different words, like, for this unoccupied freestanding accessory building.
Yeah, no, and I think that's what we recognized as we were going through this meeting, that there seemed to be not a disconnect, but it just didn't seem to be clear how that fit with the zoning. And that's what we wanted to fix, clarify, I think is the best word to use here. With the zoning.
right.
Yeah.
I mean,
So, and
the zoning is clear that you don't allow a detached accessory dwelling unit, but I mean, if you, I don't know, my gut feeling is to clear this language up about the unoccupied freestanding building that can be closer than the setback, and to clarify that you don't allow detached accessory dwelling units, is something that would take a little bit of time, my time, to go through the ordinance more carefully and make some recommendations, and then for you to have a couple of meetings to kind of work through the language. I'm not feeling like it's something I'm concerned if we try to do it in a rush, we'll break something else in the ordinance inadvertently.
yes, no, absolutely. It's more the timing of when the ZBA meeting was, and that opened the,
It raised the
Door to
question,
this,
so
exactly.
now, yeah.
And definitely something to put on the list for the coming year.
Yeah.
all right, so let's add that to our tickler list for fun projects for next year.
I just always worry about last minute zoning amendments, not.
Oh, absolutely, no, absolutely. The other thing that kind of came from that, which I'm sorry I didn't put on the agenda, but if our STR zoning is clear enough, because we have it in two different locations on our chart, both under residential and commercial. And in conversations before and after the meeting, there was some conflation as to how, or some misunderstanding as to what's allowed where. And with that as well, I was thinking perhaps there's a way to make short-term rentals more clear.
I guess,
Um,
yeah, and when you asked me to look at that, I'd forgotten about that. The reason I had separated it and put short-term rentals as a commercial permitted use was to make clear that it's not really an accessory use of a residence, but if the decision of the planning board has been to not require a site plan review for those, then I think there's probably no harm in doing a really little amendment to move that up to be under residential so that it is all together under residential. That was why I initially put it under commercial.
Right. Well, there is still the permit, if that's the right term, for people who want to rent their dwelling for more than 30 days, 30 calendar days in a year.
And that's under the selectmen's authority to require a business permit. But
Right.
I think it's fine if we do a little amendment to move short-term rental up in the table, move it from commercial to residential. If that's what some of the board wants to do, because you're gonna have a zoning amendment hearing anyway for that lot change.
Right. I think that would help clarify it. My other thought was to give it like a separate section, but perhaps just grouping them both
Yeah.
together. Residential would clear it.
I considered that, and I don't think that's the right solution.
Okay. What are the
Because
board?
it-
No. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Tara.
Well, where do you draw the line on pulling out separate uses into their own section of the table?
Yeah, sure. That can get confusing in its own.
But I would go a step farther maybe. The problem with listing things is that which is not listed all of a sudden becomes even more nebulous or dislodged. There are things that we may not think of.
In terms of short-term rental, how do you see that applying?
This gets back to where we've got the town issuing pieces of paper for it. We have things in there that talk about how many units you can have, how long it has to be, what the cumulative amounts have to be and all that. I think that's enough. I don't
Well,
see.
Mike, we're only talking about moving where it appears in the table now.
Yeah, because right now it's under,
Yeah, I know.
short-term rentals under commercial, and just talking about putting it with the other reference to short-term rentals under residential. So they're both
And-
together.
And to be clear, if something's not listed in your zoning, it's not allowed. So it definitely has to be listed.
What are other thoughts on this? So do you think that would be more confusing, Mike, putting them
I think it's more
together?
confusing, but that's just me. I mean,
I think we should put them all together because it's difficult enough for someone who's not familiar in the manner in which we are. But
Right,
somebody was saying, I think I might want to rent a room in my house. Let's see what the town has to say about this. If you can't find it all in one place, where are they going to look for it? It's
That
difficult
one
enough.
is under residential.
it's all one.
well,
table.
it's only 1 or 2 bedrooms and owner occupied that's under residential. It's not,
That's what confused
it's
me.
not the short, under the residential, number 1 residential, as
Let's
opposed to.
move it. It's literally 10 minutes of my time to write you an amendment.
Okay. Does anyone have any objections to moving it?
No.
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 I think that Tara's original suggestion, which was to just leave this until next year, was a good one. I think it deserves more thought after listening to everybody here and around the table.
Well, I think the suggestion to leave it for next year was in terms of the occupancy, whatever wording. This is just for the short-term rentals for where it lands in our chart. Because we have short-term rentals under number 4, commercial, permitted across the board. And then we also have renting 1 or 2 bedrooms in an owner occupied, et cetera, under residential. And we're just talking about moving the short-term rental from that number 4 commercial section to the number 1 residential section, just at the table, just to make that clear.
Yeah, I have no problem with that.
Okay.
Where are other
home occupation. What other home occupations listed? Are they under commercial? Or
Under
Oh,
residential,
they're under residential.
yeah. So that's,
Yeah.
because that's how we're classifying them, yeah.
I think what confused me as I was reading through this was that you had to look in several different areas of the zoning to try to understand. You had to, it was like going through those Russian nesting dolls. You had to
Yeah.
keep on digging until you got to, oh, okay, now I understand.
Yeah,
And I was getting a bollocked up between dwelling versus dwelling unit. And I think, Terry, we had talked about this. You had the same experience. And I'm wondering if in that short section we have on short-term rentals, if there's any clarification. I think we have a couple paragraphs there. Is there any clarification that we can put there so that a person who wants to understand short-term rentals, at least who wants to go to zoning to understand it, as opposed to just picking up the phone and calling the town, but actually it'd be useful for the town to be able to point to one specific area in the zoning when they give their answer. And I just didn't see that, Tara. I guess I was saying I really had to dig through a number of different things. I'll give you an example. When we talk about dwelling, we say in our definitions, a dwelling is a single detached principal building used primarily for residential occupancy. And then we also define dwelling unit, which is what we talk about in short-term rentals. We don't talk about a dwelling, but we talk about dwelling units. A dwelling unit is one or more living and or sleeping rooms in a dwelling designed for occupancy by one or more individuals. So the first thing that hit me as a grammar nut is the design for occupancy by one or more individuals. Does that refer to dwelling or does that refer to dwelling unit? So I was really going down a rabbit hole trying to understand
Well,
what we were
that's
trying to
pretty-
say.
Yeah, that's just common terminology. I mean, that a dwelling can have 1 unit, 2 units, 3
Right.
units. And they're dwelling units within the dwelling, and those terms are used pretty deliberately in the zoning ordinance to mean either the whole building or
Right.
the unit in the building.
But all I'm saying is that in our short-term rental section in the zoning, we don't talk about dwelling at all. We just talk about dwelling unit in those 2 paragraphs, I believe.
That's
that are there.
correct, because if you have a unit in a condominium building,
Right.
if your covenants don't preclude it, you can do the short-term rental too. We were very clear that it's every dwelling unit.
So
Whereas
implying
some
within a dwelling.
some towns don't do that. Some don't allow it, say, in a duplex because of the impact on the
Right.
other party, but you wanted to allow it in dwelling units, so that's how it's written.
So it implies dwellings because you're talking at a lower.
In the individual units within a condominium, so.
No, no, well, a
but
house.
also an LDR house.
Yeah.
Well,
So a house, I guess what I was getting confused is someone wanted to rent the whole house out. Is that a dwelling or a dwelling unit?
a single-family home is both. It's a dwelling that has 1 dwelling unit in it.
Right. That's the rabbit hole I was going down. That's why I finally was able to figure out, okay, this is what it said. Maybe I was just being too,
I don't know, that's just normal terminology in
Yeah.
every zoning ordinance. I don't
okay.
think this, yeah.
Well, would it be minor enough to, and this is, section T, short-term rentals, to say dwelling/dwelling unit as a short-term rental? Would that clarify? Would that have clarified it for you if you'd seen it?
Yeah, probably. But again, I may have been just reading it my own unusual way. I'm really more interested in seeing, I see Mark is on here, whether the town administration feels that it's clarified enough for them to be able to explain to somebody
Oh, sure.
what is being discussed here. I think combining that issue in one table is a great idea. That would get rid of at least one of those nesting dolls, at least in my mind.
Okay. Mark, you're muted.
the clarification that a dwelling is a dwelling unit is enough from my standpoint. We can just tell them, I would prefer the wording that Wendy just recommended as far as dwelling/dwelling unit. That makes it perfectly clear, but I don't want to go through an amendment to try to, explain that to people. We can just tell them that they mean the same thing.
Okay,
And we can allow the entire LDR house to be rented. That's fine.
Yeah, I think if I was gonna recommend some language, and again, I hate to do these last minute ones because something else might be wrong, but I think the place I would change it isn't there, but in the definitions by, in the definition, a dwelling unit, add the term includes single family home. But again, I don't ever do zoning amendments off the top of my head. I think there's a danger in that, and most of the towns I work with, the first year was spent cleaning up all those inadvertent last minute amendment type things. And
Well, let's write that down then, Tara, for next year.
a little tickler,
And
yeah.
that might help clarify it.
Yeah.
But let's think through it and see if it breaks anything else.
yeah, good.
Dwelling, so we'll put off the dwelling/dwelling unit, but for the short-term rental, would the board still be all right with moving from commercial to residential in the chart? So at least it's all together there.
That's just a clarification, right?
That's
Doesn't
just a
require
clarification.
any,
I mean, it would, does it need, something like that need an official amendment or?
It does. I'm aware that there are a couple of towns making what they call administrative amendments to zoning without going to town meeting, but there's nothing in state law that allows that.
Okay. Well, let's follow state law. I think it should be pretty straightforward. It's just organizational, as far as explaining it to folks, to voters. So I guess we need to vote and have a motion on doing this, since it's official. Do we have a motion?
sure, I move that we combine the use table for short-term rentals, which now located, one section located in residential and the other in commercial, into one part of the table,
Well, no, both under residential.
both under
I think
residential. Right?
I think what you probably want to say is to move 4L short-term
Okay.
rental up to the
To I to
1J.
one J. All right. I would move 4L use to one, to combine it with 1J use.
I'll second that motion.
Alrighty, all those in favor?
Michael Pell, aye.
Rich, I.
Nancy,
Nancy Knight, aye.
Wendy Rathke, aye.
John Racine, aye.
Bill Spence, aye.
Bill
Bill
Larson?
Larson, I.
Alrighty, so we will put that on for the public hearing in January. Excellent, okay. And the zoning map change request language. Mark, had that been? Did you do that? Did Conservation Commission do that? Who's working
Well,
on that language?
they have voted to request that you include it, but the change is to, I'm sorry, I don't have the lot. It's probably on the map behind you, Wendy, but it's to change that single lot from village commercial to greenbelt.
Yeah, it's the, it was on here, 32C. No, 104, 30.
104,
Yeah.
32C. And
32C.
that is that is the request. I do not have an actual warrant article wording done yet.
Okay.
But what do you need, Tara, to move that forward from us?
If the planning board votes for it, I could just work with Alicia on the wording for both of these and help her get them noticed.
Well, we did vote on it last meeting, right?
Yeah,
I did.
they did.
Okay.
They approved it
Then-
last meeting, I thought.
Okay,
Yeah.
then I'll just work with Alicia on getting them both noticed for January.
Awesome. The we talked about the potential change for the signage ordinance. And Mark had spoken with town council about that, and as Tara had kind of said previously, it's not a needle that can be threaded. There, with the, inability to regulate content, there's really no way for us to regulate or to disallow any type of real estate signs as long as they are constructed of the appropriate materials. So,
And size.
yes. There's unless if the board has come up with anyone in the board's come up with an individual brainstorm that would enlighten everyone at this point, there's somewhat of a dead end in doing anything to change the signage.
Is there any limit to size?
Yes,
It's part of the regulation.
yeah.
Good.
They can be large.
How large? Yeah.
Well, it's all delineated there. I mean, when we wrote them, the idea of a permanent sign was something for like identifying a condominium association, et cetera. And so those same dimensions can be used for any messaging on a sign that's of the appropriate materials and colors. There's just not a lot more we can do with it. So it's a bit of a new dawn sign wise for Waterville Valley in terms of what people will be reading potentially as they go down the street, but kind of is what it is at this point. Did you have anything you wanted to add, Mark?
No, I think you summarized it correctly. It's the differentiation between the material types and the way they're constructed and the sizes, and that's what we can regulate. There's no way to create another category of sign. So they're either temporary or they're permanent.
So that's where we're at with that.
Yep.
Anyone have any thoughts, issues? Just understand where we're at. Questions? All right.
Could we, before we leave the zoning, can we just clarify that no petition amendments were filed with the select board as of yesterday, the close of business? That was the deadline.
That's
Right, there
correct.
weren't any,
We
Yeah.
didn't receive anything.
Great, so I'll work with Elisa on public hearing notice and then a warrant article for these two. When does one of the drawbacks of a January public hearing is always when your town report goes to print. Because you need the warrant language for that. When does that, Mark?
We would need it by the end of January.
Okay, we're good. And
Um,
do you want to have the hearing at your regular meeting or the night before, as you talked about sometimes for public hearings?
we
So there-
we had been doing public hearings the night before. These are relatively minor, so I would be fine with doing it the day of our regular meeting. Unless if anyone has any objections or thoughts to that. I can't imagine there's going to be a whole lot of discussion and debate around these.
No, that's
I could be
it.
wrong. I don't want to jinx anything.
All right, good.
So we're good with doing it the right morning of our regular meeting in January? Sure, okay. All right.
I do have
John,
a question on signs. There's no, it's not legal for a for sale sign in Waterville Valley, is that correct?
Well, that's what we're
Wow.
talking about, because we can't regulate what's written on a sign. We can only regulate what materials the sign is made of.
So
It can,
I'm confused.
okay,
Are we allowing for sale signs in Waterville Valley?
we can't prohibit them if they're constructed correctly.
Okay.
Talking about the ones outside of us
Yeah,
specifically. I have the same issue.
I am not answering that question.
No.
I just had a question of my own.
Okay.
Anywhere in town, are they allowed? So,
if they're constructed, following the guidelines for permanent signs.
Yep.
To withstand the wind gusts, et cetera, wood, appropriate coloring, then,
And they get a permit.
and they get, yes, of course.
So,
Well,
but-
Wendy, that's whether they're temporary or permanent. The content of the sign
True, yes,
is irrelevant. So
Yeah.
you could have a temporary for sale sign, or you could have a permanent one.
true. Thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah,
Is it the content of the sign that cannot be regulated or the intent?
Content.
the content.
So that, could there be an ordinance against for sale signs?
Well, the reason there couldn't is the guidance from the Supreme Court decision is if you have to read it to know if it's legal, then your ordinance is not legal. And I don't know how you'd know what the intent was without reading it.
Well,
So imagery, you can.
wow.
Yeah,
Interesting.
isn't that
There's-
fun?
The Supreme Court is gonna be issuing a decision on off-site signs in this term. They've already heard the arguments because we've all been asking, well, how do we know if it's an off-site sign without reading it?
so
So,
there could be, there could be a sign with the intent to scare the public. In other words, there's a bomb somewhere. And you couldn't deny that because you can't read the language.
well, there's always been that one caveat on free speech, hasn't there? Like that you can't yell fire in a crowded theater.
Yeah, there are other laws, Terry, that I think public safety could use if it's a health safety issue. But as far as our sign regulations, the selectmen cannot deny a permit application based on what a sign says.
But not the intent.
Well,
Relevant.
How do you know the intent?
if the intent is to cause public harm, then, Tara, correct me if I'm wrong, but if the intent would be to scare someone or cause harm, that we could point to another statute within public safety, then we could probably take action,
Right,
So-
not under our zoning ordinance.
right.
Okay. And what about like images on the sign? Can we regulate
there-
that?
Well, yeah, like naked people or whatever. I don't know what the statute, I don't know what the statutes say about that, but I'm sure that again, going back to public health safety, we would have to ask public safety if we can do anything about that. But there are some words that we may not want to have around town, but I don't think we can limit those.
Unless if they're offensive.
Well,
I mean-
again, that would have to go to the police department.
Well, some are beyond the eye of the beholder. I mean,
Naked people.
I think though that, I mean, if the town administration can find some place to land to deny a permit, then it would be up to the applicant to decide whether they wanted to go forward with some sort of challenge.
Right.
And that's where you would be,
yeah,
right? Someone's not, I think, just gonna plopping a sign would be in violation of our permitting process anyway.
Right,
They'd have to go through permitting.
right.
So it would be a challenge if they wanted to.
And they have to
Take
show
that.
you.
I just think we
If you
need
can
to,
see it. If you
yeah,
can see
we
it.
just need to differentiate what we can regulate as far as the zoning ordinance is concerned under the sign permit, right? Away from the public health and safety aspect, which we can handle in a different way. It's just, I wouldn't want the selectmen to be caught, denying something that could potentially be a free speech issue. I'd rather have that in a way approved at the board level and then handled through the public safety, public health, and the criminal statutes, if you would.
Makes sense. Okay.
Okay.
Clear
you
but
gonna-
unhappy? All right.
It's a big, I think someone said, I think Wendy, you said it, it's a totally different way of approaching signs than we ever have taken for Waterville Valley.
Can I ask a question? I'm just curious.
Yep.
Does anyone find the new Green Peak expansion, whatever you want to call it, sign offensive? I'm just curious because.
Has anyone complained, Mark?
Has
to the
anyone
town?
complained about it?
They've only complained about the content, not about the sign itself.
Content?
Well, yeah, the same conversation you're having right now about for sale signs.
Oh, I understand.
But no, the construction of it, the location, the materials that it's made out of, no one's complained about that. To me.
Curious.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. So why don't we move on to master plan check-in with Tara before she has to
That's what
leave
it
us
is.
so we can see
This is where we leave.
where our deficiencies are and what.
Are many deficiencies?
So Tara, I'll hand it over to you for that.
Sure. So one of the things that's hanging out there that I'd hope to come from you guys rather than me is some of the just more descriptive and introductory language. And there's there's language in a few places that is kind of similar and it needs to be similar, but not exactly the same. Like you describe the town at the beginning of the plan, and then you might make reference to some of its unique origins in the beginning of land use, in the beginning of recreation. And I think a few different people had volunteered for that. And since I don't have any of it, I think it might make sense for one person to work with me on all of those pieces. And if somebody volunteers, then I could, work directly with them on what it is I'm looking for. And
So-
I have to say that Bill Spence had volunteered for some of it. So if he's willing, he might want to work with me on all of it.
My problem, and it would be done by now if I'd been able to find the information. In other words, trying to get information about digital infrastructure in the town. We rely upon Spectrum. Spectrum said nothing. There's been no
Yeah,
response.
That's the next thing on my list though, but that's not what I was talking about yet. I was talking about some of the more introductory and descriptive language.
So your initial thing is more general.
Yeah.
General descriptive.
And I would put together a document that shows you exactly what I'm talking about.
Okay. Bill, are you still interested in helping with that? Is anyone else
Well,
interested?
I'm typically on the hot seat for this because it's, I'd gladly do it, except, right, what?
Well, that's what Tara's saying. She would put together more of a guideline, but this is more introductory, general descriptive for Waterville Valley, not necessarily getting too in the weeds.
And a lot of it's looking at language that's in the old plan to see what you want to do to update it and adapt it to the new one.
Yes. I've been, started reading other towns' master plans to see what they say, to see how they attempted to resolve this problem.
So that sounds like
And
an
not much
affirmation.
there either.
Well, don't do that. Your town is unique, and what I'm talking about is the way that's talked about in the plan. Yeah, this is something I can easily do, but I, in your interest in keeping what I do on it to a minimum, I thought it was something somebody on the board could easily do as well.
So
Okay, Tara.
with Tara's guidance. And
Tara's
anyone,
guidance, I'll do it with you.
do you feel like one person is enough, Tara, or should we try
I
to?
think one might be good because
I'd like to resolve this matter so that my name doesn't continue to come up.
All
all
of it.
right,
1, 2, 3, go.
So that's good for that. Bill, reach out if you need help with this.
and I'll take some time to lay it all out real clearly. And then the next thing was that you had wanted to write something about the growth in remote working trends and what the needs are for that. Just a couple sentences for the economic development section would be good. I don't think we need necessarily information from providers, but I can give you a contact that has all that information of what services where, if that's what you want to.
Yes,
Can I ask a question, Tara?
numbers and data are most useful in topics of this nature.
Right, but she
So-
said she's just looking for a couple of sentences.
Yeah.
It is, but I thought too, what you wanted to do was just kind of make a statement about the growing trend of remote working and what that would need.
Yes.
Because it is changing as we speak and growing, so we may not be able to capture it in its entirety anyway. Mark,
See,
Mike, what's your
the
question?
question that I have with regard to remote work is, and yes, it has changed drastically in the last 2 years. But what we don't know, and I talk to business people around the country, is 2 years from now, and I'll use my head, God willing, when the pandemic is past, God willing, are we going back to where we were?
Right.
And you get mixed answers on that.
Right,
And my concern with talking about it in a master plan, which is forward-looking, is we don't know where things are going to be, whether or not we're going to have the way remote work is now, all right, which is significant, or whether it's gonna go back the way it was.
But
Right.
we are seeing a lot of major employers saying, when all this is done, we're still gonna let you work remotely 2 days a week, for example. Or we're gonna have a certain percentage of our workforce at home because they're finding a savings and benefit. So I think, the answer is gonna be that some of it will stick, but not all.
Yeah, but that's true, but if you're talking about someone whose office is in Boston, for example, and they have to spend 3 days a week in their office in Boston, are they gonna wanna continue to have a place, their major residence up here? We don't know the answer.
But
to
I
that.
don't think we need to know the answer
But
to
we don't
that.
have to know the answer. We
Yeah.
just have to write that.
Right, and-
So
and-
I don't think it's a big deal, Mike.
Okay,
Yeah.
Really, chill.
Yeah.
And then we'll just modify it. If things
Okay.
change, we
Yeah,
modify it.
I think we just need to write, here's the issues.
As of today, this is how
And
we
that
see
that
it.
is an issue.
okay.
And it's a predictive document.
Yeah.
We don't always have to be right.
Right. Well, it'll
We
get
don't have to be
revised.
correct about
No,
every.
it's not predictive. It's
Not that I blame you.
Aspiration.
here are the trends, here's the ones that we think are positive and we want to build on, and here are the ones we think are negative and we want to try to redirect.
right,
Okay,
It's not a crystal ball, it's a plan.
right.
Right.
Okay,
That can be revised.
Yeah.
that's fine.
okay.
Yeah.
So then what's next,
Moving
Tara?
on.
What's next was, there's just a little paragraph about and it's in land use, and Rich had volunteered to do it. It's just a little statement about the importance of the resort owner on the land use in town, and it just needs a little updating, and I think we haven't really touched on it yet, and it's huge. It really should be written about in the plan. And I wondered if Rich was still on board to do that, and we could be in touch about what I'm looking for if it's not clear.
Okay, yeah, Tara, I'm sorry. I got, I just had other things on my plate, and I actually have forgotten because I've been giving you bits and pieces of things. And I just have lost track of what I still
And
owe
what
you.
you gave, and what you've given me is perfect, so.
Okay, so this is the importance of the resort owner to land use. I'll discuss it with you and see exactly what section you're looking at.
Yeah, good. Because I think it's something that we really want to have a focus on. It's one of the things that makes, and why I wouldn't look at other town plans for examples. It's what makes yours really unique. Nancy is wrapping up recreation. I know I saw some great progress. I think one of the other holes, Mike has been the information on schools for the facilities section, and I can send, if you need another copy of this outline that was the homework, I can send that to you again.
Send it to me, Mike. Did you
Sorry,
send it to
Send it where?
Mike Capel?
Yes,
I have access to all the school information.
yes, you are who we've been waiting
Yeah, I
for.
understand. I've been busy.
All
I've
right,
been tied up with.
so aside from that, then I think, I have a couple weeks, the end of this month, that don't have meetings because of holidays, where I could really focus on chewing up the next draft. If I could get some guidance from, if Wendy and Mike could get together after the meeting and let me know what my level of effort should be on it, because I need to tailor the time and energy I spend on it and the level of detail on what you have left in your budget for this year for it.
Yeah.
In other words, I could spend all of 2 weeks full time, and that's about, a certain dollar amount. But if you could give me direction on how much time I should spend on this next draft before the end of December, that would be helpful.
Well, I mean, with an eye to the budget, I guess I would always say the best you can do with the least amount of effort. But, because I can't help but think that even after putting a lot of time into a revision, there will still be a fair amount of edits and suggestions from the board. So I'd hate to see it be, too extensive an effort. But yeah. All right. I had kind of done a preliminary look at the budget, and I think we're in pretty good shape.
Yeah,
As far-
if you or Mark could email me after the meeting with.
Yeah.
I haven't kept good track myself of what I've spent on the master plan versus other things for you this year, and we could just be clear, because there is stuff in here that I expected from people that in a different way or didn't get or whatever, that I've got to fill in some holes. And I want to give you a good draft, but I want to make sure that I'm not going to go over your budget and doing that.
Okay. All right. Mark and I will communicate about it, and then we'll reach out to you.
Great. And yeah, that's it then.
Okay. That sounds like progress then. Good job, everyone.
The time isn't that I'm trying to make you a Cadillac, but I'm trying to make sure that all the bits and pieces people have given me fit together, and really go through it carefully and give you the next draft with questions in it, like, well, this group said this and that group said that, and they don't quite go together, so the planning board needs to talk about this, right? I want to give it to you where it's your menu for how to finish. But
Okay.
you don't want it, it's not a plan of, it's just these chapters glued together is what I'm trying to say, and why I've kind of waited to do this, because I need to see everybody's, and I don't have natural resources, but I at least have their recommendations now. So that will help. Now I can do land use because I have the recommendations from natural resources. And land use is the big thing. This really is a land use plan, but I've been holding off on that till I had all the pieces so that the land use plan is consistent with all the other pieces. So those are the two things that I'd like to spend those 2 weeks doing, is the land use plan, get you an action plan draft, and build you a draft with questions in it that gives you your kind of what the board needs to work through.
Okay. Great.
And before I
right.
sign off, I should just make sure you didn't have any questions on my renewal contract.
I don't believe so. It seemed pretty straightforward. Mark, did you have any questions? If you're still there.
The sign is there.
Well, I'll check with Mark while I'm checking with the budget for the master plan on your contract, and we'll make sure to get back to you today about that if there's any issues. Otherwise, we'll just execute it.
Okay. All right.
So-
Have a good rest of your meeting. I'm gonna go on to my other thing.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Thanks, Tara.
Thank you. Oh,
All right.
Merry Christmas, everybody.
Oh, yeah, that too.
Oh, Merry
And Happy New
Happy
Year.
New Year.
All right, so why don't we circle back now to the minutes? So, last month's minutes, November 11th.
The only thing I had, being a grammar Nazi, is you capitalize the T in the planning board a number of places, and a number of places you don't. So I would just be consistent without the capital T.
All right.
Grammar Nazi comment.
Thank you.
I can come up with others if you want, but
I'm glad you are. But
no, you don't want me to do that.
I have to pick on you, Bill Spence, but you had submitted a rewording. Do you have that with you?
No.
Did you want to make that suggestion?
Okay. Thank you, Wendy.
Yeah.
Line 50. Find any areas to strengthen that related to the content of signs. And in 57 of the, what I was trying to point out here was that the ZBA had hired town council, and therefore it was necessary for the board to find other counsel. And so I suggested a rewording to make that more clear. Did you,
Would
you
you,
got it?
would you read that to the rest of the board? Because
Fine.
not, the rest of the
Line
board hasn't
57
seen it.
then would read that appears variance request hearing, period. This was done because the ZBA had retained current town council in advance of the hearing in the event that the ZBA found it necessary to consult council following the decision taken at the hearing. And take out the sentence depending upon the decision made at the hearing that the ZBA would be using current town council. I wanted to make it clear that it was only the,
Yeah, no, it was clear, yeah,
okay,
if everyone's fine with that, it definitely was clear then. Yeah.
and on page, I'm sorry, line 63. I made the suggestion for this or any other matters requiring legal counsel.
Wait, I'm sorry, which line?
His line's
63.
changed now.
Uh-oh.
That's the title,
It
old
may have
business
just
master
been
plan.
because the edits on there moved the line.
Yeah,
So
he's
I
got
think
different
it's
Uh,
for 61 for any other issues requiring legal counsel. For this or any.
okay, so line
Correct.
61 should be for this or any, is that what you're saying?
Yes. And one other nitpick on this page is line 82. The number of cars entering and leaving town.
Is that correct? Is one of, so it's 80, 79, 80 speed and numbers of cars.
I can double check with Patrick. I did ask him about that and then I was trying to get it right in there and I'm pretty sure he said leaving town. But I'll double check with Patrick and Dave, just to make sure.
Yeah,
I
so-
recall what they said was that they have one sign that clocks speed coming into town and that it measures or counts the number of cars coming in. And there's one on Valley Road exiting, that it also counts.
Okay, I'll
Let them
check in
tell you,
with-
let them tell you what the answer is.
Yeah,
but-
I'll check in with them and
What do you want to do with the data?
What?
We have number of cars coming in, number of cars coming out, which provides data.
Yes.
What do we want to do? What is it? What are we doing with that data?
Well, let's get to that after we finish doing the minutes. 'cause that's- Yeah, it might just be a matter of saying that maybe 2 new speed boards, which combined provide the
Yes.
exiting and entering.
Yes. On my page, it's line 90, but I don't know where it is on. But it's a grammar nitpick. And that Mark Dakota, it's under Golden Heights Residential Development Update.
Okay,
And it says, Mark Dakota updated the planning board stating, in other words, there was a verb missing. Stating that Ben Legare would be maintaining ownership.
Okay.
And on the line following that, of the Golden Heights residential development, which the planning board approved on, etc.
okay.
Here endeth. No more.
Does anyone else have any?
This is so much work.
Yeah,
Okay,
good catch.
so I just wasn't quite sure. So line 34, it's lot 104.326.
oh, and this.
Yeah, that would be confusing.
Eagle-eyed.
Yeah, very good.
Good thing you showed up live today.
It also shows up on line
Yes,
38.
38, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Anything further? Anyone? No? Okay, take a motion for these minutes.
I there's a motion to accept the minutes of November 11th, 2021 as amended.
As amended, yeah, second motion.
Alrighty, all in favor?
Mike Capel, aye.
Rich eye.
Nancy and I.
Wendy Rathke, right?
John Racine, aye.
Bill Spence, aye.
Bill Larson?
And I,
Excellent. All right, good. All right, thanks for bearing with me, everyone, on these little jugglings that we're doing. So that's
And-
that.
Thanks for
Now-
the copy, Wendy.
Yeah, of course. Well, Alicia provided
Alicia.
it, so. Now, another thing that did not make it onto the agenda because it got added yesterday, late in the afternoon. The select board is reviewing the their off-premise solicitation, which basically pertains most immediately to food trucks. So you should have in your paperwork both the proposed off-premise solicitation application and the selectmen's ordinance number 9. And I hate to throw this at everyone kind of last minute like this, but the select board had asked us to review. No, Rich, you're more in this than I am. Why
Gee,
don't- why
thanks.
don't you- Yeah, well, no.
Mark, no. So listen, let me just preface it quickly. First, we're not talking about here at this time whether or not to allow food trucks in Waterville Valley. That's a different discussion. I know there's been discussion around town. It was in the latest issue of the Wigwag, and that's going to a much more involved basic question that the town will have to, or if the town so decides, can deal with. At this point in time, food trucks are allowed in town, and the town administration uses Selectmen's Ordinance number 9 to permit them. And that permitting occurs through the off-premises solicitation permit. And the issue is that the planning board as well has tried to impact or regulate, maybe the word here, that may be a bit strong, the operation of food trucks. As you may recall, we've had discussions with a property owner in the past, and we've depended upon something we added that it's relatively new. It's only 2 years old, didn't exist when Selectmen Ordinance number 9 was promulgated. That is the minor site plan review. We've tried to regulate the operation of food trucks through a minor site plan review, specifically using sections capital B, which is minor site plan review, D, additional or increased outdoor use of areas of no more than 500 square feet, such as for dining or recreation, including decks or patios, and F, other new or expanded development activities or changes of use which the planning board determined at its discretion to be minor in nature. And we were trying to regulate, thinking that it was under the planning board's purview in order to protect the rights of abutters, so for them to have a say in any activity on a property that they may find unpalatable. Pardon the pun. So there's a bit of a conflict here, and there's a bit of a question. There's a question of a dividing line here as well. As far as Selectmen's Ordinance number 9 is concerned, it basically prohibits off-premises solicitation, if I read it correctly. But the select board has the authority to grant a, quote, temporary exception of up to 3 days.
Under section 3.
There's a section 3, yeah, prohibitions exception. So it has been permitting food trucks for up to 3 days using the off-premises solicitation. And remember, we're talking about third-party operation, right? It's not somebody who owns a piece of property and wants to put a food truck in there if it's allowed, right? It has to first be allowed by the zoning. It's inviting a third party in to operate a food truck on their property. That's the off-premises solicitation. And what the board has been somewhat struggling with and trying to update, and what you have in front of you is the proposed off-premises solicitation permit application, is that it's trying to find that dividing line so that the select board can grant the permit, but yet there's an opportunity for the planning board and or people who feel that they could be impacted by the approval of the permit to weigh in on the matter. That's sort of the background, I think. Mark, did you want to add something more specific as far as the operational details? And let me know if there's anything I got wrong. Go ahead and correct.
No, from my perspective, you got it right. Dave Noyes is on the call, so
Hi, Dave.
he can address specifics from an enforcement standpoint. I think what we need to do, and this may be a zoning amendment for next year or however we want to do it. We just need to balance Selectmen's Ordinance number 9 with the site plan review regs and the zoning ordinance to make sure that we don't have any conflicts. Our first step, I don't know, you didn't provide them with the current permit application. Is that correct, Wendy?
No, the permit, the current,
Don't
that's
have
the
the current
proposed.
one.
You
It's-
do, okay, so you.
No, we
could-
don't.
No, we
We
don't,
don't.
we don't.
Oh, you don't, okay, well, the current permit application is very simplistic and we're, yeah. And so we're just trying to update that to give Dave and the folks in public safety some additional information when someone applies for the permit from an enforcement standpoint. So we will need, I think there'll need to be more conversation to potentially deconflict the granting of these offsite solicitation permits with your intent as the planning board with the minor site plan review.
I have a question, and I apologize. But as I'm reading Selectmen's Ordinance number 9, section 3, the first paragraph. That any person may apply to the selectmen for a limited temporary permit to allow off-price soliciting for a period not to exceed 3 days.
Correct.
So I guess my question is, when I look at the proposed application, and it says that you can get a permit for seasonal,
Yes, you've hit, yes.
you understand? So my question is, this says you can only have a permit for 3 days,
Yes.
I think. And this says you can have it for a week, a month, or 3 months. And in my
It needs to be clarified.
aged
Right.
mind, all right.
3-day increments is what we need.
Yeah, you're
But-
not reading the whole thing. It says, but
Well-
it can't remain on site for more than 3 consecutive days.
But the
It's-
thing
it's
is,
clear.
I'm looking at this.
but the
I am
thing,
too.
and
Yeah.
then,
Read the whole thing.
and then, but the next step from that is how long do they need to leave before the next 3-day period starts?
That's one
And
of
that's
the,
not
that's
identified
one of the
at all.
Yeah.
questions. But no, I think that was one of the immediate things that hit us when we were discussing it yesterday. It's easy to miss that or not understand that you see seasonal, you think, okay, well, then I can have it every day or, for as much as long as, but that's not, because you have to look a little further. Well, in 3-day increments. And then what's the interval?
Yeah.
Well, we should spell that out.
Well, yeah, that's what I think what the guidance or recommendation or what the planning board thinks that the select board, how the select board should approach that. Also keeping in mind, to what extent do we want minor site plan review to play in any of this?
Right, at what point, like if someone does apply for a seasonal permit, is that when a minor site plan review kicks in?
And also where it says moving, shouldn't we say without moving out of the valley?
Well, that is,
Do we though? Because when someone,
I don't know.
that is
I'm
another
just,
question.
I'm kind of I'm trying to balance
yeah,
the
because
two pieces of paper.
someone in the valley could have, because keep in mind, this isn't just for a food truck. This is also would apply like for an art show or outside craft fair. If someone set up a booth, it could be someone who resides in Waterville Valley who wants to participate in this on somebody else's property. And this would be their application for that.
As a
Right.
general solicitation.
Right,
Could be
Not on your
solicit, could
own.
be solicited anything.
right.
But the question would be that if it's permitted for 3 days, then does the truck have to leave?
Well, it does,
That lot, but not. the
but where
town.
and how long? Right.
In other words, could they get 2 permits? One
Yeah.
for one location, one for another, and
Exactly.
just go between them so they're here constantly?
I-
Exactly.
Well, this
Going to
gets
different
into, I
locations.
think and we don't necessarily want to let it lie there, but this gets into a judgment issue on behalf of the select board and the enforcement officer. Give them the leeway to understand that may be happening. And so would the select board refuse the second permit because really you're subverting the intent of the ordinance.
But Rich, in all respect to you and Dave and everyone else, shouldn't we spell it out? Let's not leave
That's what we're talking
leave
about.
this in trip. And, you know, I have great respect for Dave, well, not you,
That's okay.
but for everyone. But let's spell out exactly what is involved here and not leave it up to judgment where somebody could say, well, it doesn't say that. Let's not get into that.
Well, except the other issue is that, and correct me if I'm wrong, the selectmen's ordinance is approved by the town.
Right.
So it can't be
So it's
changed
like
at this
Basic
point.
law.
I understand that.
Right.
I
So that-
fully understand.
But is it the intent to say that a food truck is a temporary installation? And that if you want to be. here
That's how the town has handled it.
In other words.
There is
the
no
food truck
separate
parked
food
here For
truck.
months could be considered an eyesore.
Well, I mean, that, yes, it could be.
Or it could be the best thing in the valley.
That's right.
And that's
Depending
why
on
we
your
looked
point of
at it
view.
in terms of a planning
Yeah,
board
I mean,
issue
we could use a little more variety.
as a additional use to a property that was approved, but wasn't approved for that when it was approved. Does everybody approve of that? Does that follow what I was trying to say? I mean, it's an additional right. It's an additional use. And so we were trying to cover that for an abutter who maybe doesn't want, say in a VC or HDR or LDR, who doesn't want a food truck every weekend parked on, next door on a commercial property where it's allowed, and have to deal with the noise and the smell, right? Food truck, potentially traffic if people
Trash.
want to, and trash. Now, all of those are other issues as well, right? Other enforcement issues as well.
But the noise is a significant one, generators used by the trucks can be quite
That's right.
loud. and
Right.
I think that it's important to have a way for abutters to be able to weigh in and for there to be noticing. So in my mind, the question is, at what point is a minor site plan? Does it morph from just the select board using their ordinance number 9 for the temporary for the 3 days? At what point does it morph into, this is a long-term thing that will have an impact on someone's residence potentially, and they should be able to weigh in? At what point does it move to a minor site plan review as well as this? And I think that's the biggest question, right?
To me,
For
that's
us
it.
right now.
But Mark or Dave, please weigh in. That's how I see it too. Yeah.
Okay.
I'll weigh in. I believe on the conversation that we had last night, the way that I understood it is we were looking at possibly modifying this, to 14 days and then only making 2 choices under the duration. A one-time temporary 3-day permit and then an annual permit. Our goal of this was for someone who was planning on doing 3 or 4 weekends during the month of January and or a vacation week, having them come in and pull multiple permits for each and every weekend. The ordinance doesn't change. They still are only allowed to be there for 3 days at a time, but we were just trying to make it a little more customer service oriented, where we weren't having these particular food trucks over and over again get these temporary 3-day permits. And I think the conversation that we had was, if it is an annual permit, then the selectmen, in reviewing the application, would look at the hours and or dates of operation, and they could determine that, yes, this is more of a regular activity, and we feel that it should be, and they can impose these types of restrictions as part of the application. And I guess the feeling is, what does the board feel would be appropriate if they see 3 weekends, 4 weekends, 4 weeks at a time? I don't know. It's whatever your guys' feeling is.
Dave, that's a good point too on the conversation from last night, is the selectmen can put any conditions that they want on the approval. And so if it's going to be an annual permit that's being issued by the selectmen under Ordinance 9, they could make a condition of that permit that the vendor, whether it's a food truck or another type of commercial vendor, go in and get minor site plan review
Right.
from the planning board within 30, 60 days, whatever the condition the selectmen want to set on it. And then if they don't do that, we can revoke the permit because they didn't meet the condition. It's just to the permit form is just, as Dave said, trying to make it clearer that you can get an extended permit, so we don't have to deal with the permit every weekend for 8 or 10 weeks in a season. So that way we are including the planning board in the process, and we're meeting the short-term rental, the minor site plan application that you guys have set up since this ordinance went into play in 1990.
Now, are we talking annual or seasonal?
Well, it can be whatever we want. Last night, we talked about just having 2 categories, a 3-day one-time use, and then an annual. Get rid of the weekly and the monthly. That just, it seemed in the conversation yesterday that people thought that muddied the water too much.
What does a food truck fall under on our table of uses? Where is it?
I would think restaurant,
Restaurant?
right? Under commercial.
I don't know if it meets the definition.
Silent on food trucks.
I think it's silent on food truck. These
Yeah,
extremely
I don't-
short-term commercial uses, I think the ordinance is kind of vague on.
Or not applicable, potentially.
But I don't think the planning board could do a site plan review on a non-permitted use. Could it?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, we were treating them as dining, and I have to look at in a area that is zoned for restaurant use, right?
Right.
Right.
This is an outdoor restaurant.
Perhaps, but if it's not specifically called out,
And we don't define restaurant either.
We don't. Okay.
What do we define dining or food establishment?
Because if we don't define restaurant, then we could include it. And that we probably should just add a definition.
Or it is a commercial use.
Yeah. Yeah, we do.
We don't-
And we do define retail. That's interesting.
Yeah, got to keep those
Under
people in
rendering
check.
services.
And we did talk about adding zone allowed on the
Right.
application part where they check off what zone they're going to be operating in. And we'll be able to derive that from the location itself too, but
We do under commercial in the table 4D, restaurants and lounges.
Yeah,
I think that's how we've been looking at food trucks,
right.
Yeah.
But no, that's a good point. We don't,
but not as a separate. And that could get to the question of, does the town want to allow food trucks?
Well, I wouldn't get caught because Dave's going to.
No, we don't want to go
Yeah.
there.
For more than just food truck.
Right.
yeah, that's the thing is you really have to think of this as not just food trucks, because right now your ordinance covers all off-site. If you're using a third party's property to sell anything, that could be tent sales, your art, craft fairs, all of this stuff. So we just have to be careful about being too specific of what we're allowing according just on the face of looking at the ordinance right now, because, you know, certainly the ordinance needs to probably be revisited at some point because it is very vague and I think hasn't doesn't address some of these things that we're looking at now. But for right now, we have to operate under what currently what it says. So it has to be pretty much everything.
In thinking through it, since we don't have established the departure time or the time away from a lot that an off-premise sales is happening. So I'm thinking, say there's a holiday week. So say Christmas week, someone wants to come in and sell, I don't know, custom jingle bells, whatever. And they want to do 3 days in, 1 days out, 3 days off, or 3 days in to cover the Christmas week. So in my mind, that's a holiday period and whatever. Anything beyond that, it would seem like where a minor site plan review would want to kick in. It's like anything more than 2 times in a month-long period, maybe would where
Well,
we were.
But Wendy, I think because the ordinance is vague right now,
Yeah,
that the selectmen can make that determination. And I
Right.
think that's what they talked about last night was if it was a simple one weekend, like a craft fair that was only going to be here once a year for one weekend, right? That would
Right.
be the one-time ordinance or one-time permit. And then anything beyond that, if it's going to be a repeat, they would be in that other, we've talked about having that as annual, or it can be whatever term we wanted. But then they can go to that category and they can make a condition on a case-by-case basis that the use go into the planning board for the minor site plan review.
Right. Well, I thought they just wanted the planning board's feedback on that. So that's where I was trying to guide the conversation.
It appears as if the minor site plan review is going to be executed if it's anything longer than the initial 3-day period.
I don't know, is it? I mean,
Again, right now, what we're saying is that the select board would consider would have the discretion, does have the discretion to set conditions in line with the particular ordinance. So is the planning board okay with that? Is the planning board okay with the select board telling an applicant, we approve this conditionally, but you have to go through minor site plan review? Because as we understand minor site plan review, this is beyond just a temporary 1 or 2 or 3 times a year for 3 days.
yeah,
And it also includes, by the way, not timing, but I guess this also gets into discretion. I think that Dave has talked about as well. Exactly where are we talking about?
right.
Okay, if we're talking about saying a food truck, say in the Waterville Academy parking lot, is that would be different maybe than having a food truck in a commercial area that's much closer to residential units or what I'm saying, dwelling units.
Mhm.
You know, would that I think would be part of the discussion. Yes, but that's the idea of
Main buildings, right?
of having a little bit of discretion. I also wonder, Mark, this doesn't prohibit anybody from just going to the planning board for minor site plan review, saying, I want to operate. In other words, before even going to the select board, they can go to and ask for a minor site plan review and then get the permit afterwards, saying, I've got the approval of the planning board.
Dave, would you even require them to?
A permit?
Would you even require them to utilize ordinance 9 if they got planning board site plan approval? Would there even be a need for it? I mean, they'd be, as long as it was a permitted use.
I think if by the definition of the ordinance, they would still need
They'd still need it. Okay.
they
sure.
still need a permit, yeah.
But
they'd
if
still
they
need a
already
permit.
had, if they already had site plan review though, it would be a kind of a pro forma thing, right?
Yes, it would be, because the selectmen still have to approve it and they would just approve it based on the site plan, approval from the site plan.
No need to set a condition because they've already gone forward.
Well, but we need to have a set way of moving forward. Like, I would hate to think that someone comes to the planning board for a minor site plan approval because I think the select board wouldn't like what they're doing. And I wouldn't in any way want the planning board to be subverting what the select board's interests are. So I feel like we have to have a clear line where they couldn't come to the planning board without having gone to the select board first.
Well, but can't you do a contingent approval of the minor site plan review that they have to go into the Board of Selectmen and get approval? So both boards are dealing with these applications. So we're covered in both ways.
We could, but I don't know. I like having a single path for all businesses to follow. And
Well, this gets to the conflict though, because we have this minor site plan review in the purview of the planning board. So someone could come to whether it's a food truck and say, just looking at the dozen or so conditions that allow for minor site plan review. It may or may not require select board action, right?
when would it not?
Expanding a deck.
Oh, yeah.
You know,
Sure.
but we've handled food trucks. We've tried to handle food trucks as part of a minor site plan review under this idea of increasing traffic
Right.
noise, increasing the serving of food on your property. And I think what we had in mind there is someone who wants to operate outside, right? Has a restaurant and wants to operate tables outside.
Right.
That's what we were trying to get at there.
Yeah.
But in the past, we've used that to discuss food trucks on the planning board.
Right, but I felt like in the past also the select board had sort of said, well, no, this is okay the way it is and let it go.
Right.
So we didn't pursue it. So I feel like anything, whether it's food trucks or anything that would qualify for an off-premise permit would need to go to the select board first,
Okay.
is my thought. I don't know how other people feel.
It's gotta go somewhere first.
And it should be
And it should be
consistently.
consistent.
But I always, in my old brain, I always thought of things as to which direction things go. And I always thought that things should go from a committee or group moving up the line of approval, with the final approval of things being select board. Whereas what we're kind of talking about is the select board doing something and then moving down for a subsequent approval to us. Now, if that, I guess that's okay. It's just opposite of the way I normally think of things.
Well, I think because the question is, we don't know when the select board would want a minor site plan review with the way things are. So
They
that's,
meet more often than we do.
No, I
Yeah.
think the suggestion was that if it exceeds more than the 3 days, that is, if you're going to be back for repeated 3-day periods, then you're going to go for a minor site plan review. And the principle behind that is to allow abutters to have something to say about the matter.
right,
Not necessarily. That you could, as someone who may just want to come back for 2 or 3 weekends, Or maybe it's just like during this period, as you outlined it, 3 days during like vacation week, 3 days, a break, 3 days. Do you really want someone to go through a minor site plan review, or did the select board simply look at that as a temporary 2-3 day temporary? Or it's just for 3 weekends during a particular period? Do you really want to go necessarily be hard and fast on 3 days if it exceeds 3 days?
No.
So
but
then,
then
on a regular
you'd have to
basis.
modify the ordinance to say that. You'd have to have some limit. How many 3-day periods? before-
There is,
Okay, but
No
then.
limit.
there's no limit
Do
on
it.
it.
Make
There's
that-
another, there's a practical issue, and I hate to be practical. But vacation week. Right, Massachusetts, February vacation, as a prime example, which is probably one of the busiest weeks
Yep.
of the year.
Yeah.
If I was running a food truck as a business person, I would not want to have things there for 3 days, go out of the valley for a day and come back and incur all that expense. From a business point of view, from a practical point of view, that doesn't make sense.
you don't have to go
But-
out of the valley, you have to leave the lot.
It just says move.
Yeah,
That's,
Well,
it's very
if it says
ill-defined.
move, I can move 3 feet.
well, move off the lot.
It doesn't say that.
But they're practically,
can.
but practically
can.
too, they may need to restock,
Yeah,
things like that.
it's not a
They may
huge,
not have to move the truck to do that.
They may not, but I'm saying
I don't know,
practicality
I
cuts
understand.
both ways.
There's practicality is,
They may have to leave every day to restock.
could be. I don't know the answer.
So-
I've never run a food truck.
but
Neither have I.
maybe.
Well, Mike, I think that's exactly the point of why we need to clarify ordinance 9. We're just not going to be able to do that in March of 22. I think all of the questions, all of the issues that we're talking about right now are all things that we need to make changes. I think what we're talking about is the proposed revised permit application sufficient for 2022 to get us to town meeting in 23, when we can propose some changes in ordinance 9 to make it more in line with the zoning ordinance and the site plan review application process. We just got to get through this interim period.
Can I make a
would think-
suggestion then?
Sorry, can I just
Go
interrupt
ahead,
one
no,
thing?
go ahead.
So I would think I like the updated permit compared to the previous one, definitely.
Annual instead of the other.
Or, just the overall,
Oh, right. It's
No.
much more comprehensive.
yeah. I think, I don't know about annual, I think seasonal makes sense or temporary, but I think we just need to perhaps add something in here where it sounds like we just have to leave it to the discretion of the select board as to whether or not a minor site plan
Right.
is needed.
And you would prefer
that
that
should be-
it go first to the select board.
I think so. And then there could be a thing in here, minor site plan
Right.
required, a little tick before this is moved forward. You tell them, no, you need a minor site plan first, and then they can bring this back to you
Right.
once. they
Or
have
make
it.
it conditional.
That
Or
can be a
that.
condition.
Yes,
So they
but
could,
just it's
Right.
ticked on here that it is that condition,
and by a certain time.
because I don't think we can do anything besides leave it to the discretion of the select board
Right.
at this point.
I would like to also see, and again, I apologize.
No,
for
go ahead.
being picky. Under the asterisk where it says, now remain on site for more than 3 days without moving off premises
Yeah, to a different.
or out of
place.
town, whichever you want, but not something stupid like 3 feet or just at least at a minimum off premises.
Mark or Dave?
Well, Dave, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, it's, we can certainly, they have to, I would consider it being off of that particular property. We can't kick people out of town.
Right.
We can't ask them to leave town, but as part of the permitting process, part of, the permit, they can't remain on that particular property, and I would see it as the property that they are given permission to use, they would have to leave.
And just to clarify one more thing, by day, are you saying business day or 24-hour period? Because could someone argue that I'm here from 9 to 5 and I'm leaving to go home to Thornton, then I'm coming back? You know, how is that defined?
It's not defined, and that's one of the typically the issues. So if we were to push it, I would consider 3 consecutive days would be 3 consecutive days.
Business day, yeah.
And then they would have to move. If you
Okay.
come back within the next 24 hours, you would still be considered to be consecutive and you'd be in violation.
Okay.
Just a comment. Is premise the right word? I mean, premises is entirely different word than premise.
Mhm.
And throughout the ordinance, the word premise is used.
Yeah, premise, from when I, way back when, worked on signs, off premise is correct.
Okay.
Yeah. I know we want to say premises.
Actually, premises is the right word, and premise is a statement done ahead of time.
That's a supposition.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
something we can fix at some point.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely worth double checking.
You're a worse grandma
but I know
Nancy
I-
than I am.
No, it's
That's saying something.
Several of us who would like being done.
Well, that's
We-
that's a completely different noun. So I think we could make that as an administrative change because we
Yeah.
know what they meant. The property,
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
what they meant.
The premises,
Oh,
Yeah.
Really?
off premises.
Oh,
Yeah.
Well,
all right.
I think
And
that's
we
a-
talked, if we redo, the ordinance, we can even change it to a vendor, but in keeping with the wording of the ordinance, that's what we kept.
Right. We're trying to use an ordinance that was, I think, really crafted to avoid the door-to-door salesman. Is that correct? That was really the underlying intent. And we're trying to handle this type of vendor, whether it's a food truck or a craft tent or something, under that same ordinance. So,
But just to get back to premise versus premises, like I just Googled off-premise sign and it's very clearly defined. Off-premise sign means an outdoor sign, blah, 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 blah. So we might need a deeper
It could-
dive
it-
into this particular
all
word.
right.
Yeah, I think it should be looked
it could be
into
two,
anyway.
Yes.
it could be two, a noun could have two different meanings,
Anyway,
like cleave, right?
It's not there. Premise.
Off
If you look
premise
up
would
premise
mean
in the
it's not,
dictionary,
not
but if you look up
consistent with the
off-premise sign,
previous.
off-premise.
Maybe
about
maybe off.
property?
Off-premise.
Well, I think premises,
Anyway.
I think premises, but
Off-premise sign would mean the sign didn't
it's
go ahead with the
premise.
previously said statement.
Well, I don't know. It could be one of those words that has multiple meanings, Terry.
Yeah, I think off-premise is the thing. Off-premise is defined here, away from or outside a building or the area of land that it is blah, blah, blah.
Interesting.
So anyway,
Is that, Mark, Dave, are you comfortable with what the planning board is saying as far as how we're going to proceed with this off-premise or premises solicitation permit application?
do we need to
Yeah,
hash it out?
I think that's fine. What we'll do is based on the conversations from the select board and you folks, we'll come up with another draft and we can, taking in all those considerations, we can move forward. We don't have to certainly implement it, right away. It's just a way for us to listening to all the concerns for the food vendors and those types of things, for helping us keep track of, who's got a business license, who's got their health certificate, that sort of stuff. So I'll work on cleaning up this draft application and we'll send it back out.
And the selectmen have their next meeting on the 22nd. And we will hopefully.
We moved
adopt-
it. Mark, I
I'm
think we moved it to the 29th.
Oh, I'm sorry, the 29th. Yes, we moved it. The 29th, and we will have something that we can use for 2022. And we can review it with you in January and go from there. But with the understanding that we'll have to work during 2022 to come up with some changes in the ordinance itself. So whatever we implement will be temporary.
The other thing is the select board had asked us to identify the exact zones where
Mhm.
this off premise, this whatever, would be pertinent in. And, you know, so looking at our chart, restaurants, you know, it's very clearly permitted, VC, C1, accessory and rec, and accessory and HDR. Same with retail stores. We hadn't put anything for snows, and from what I understand, that could be an issue.
It's a special district, but is it considered rec or is it completely the special district?
It is
Yeah.
on the zoning map. I think you can check me behind you, Wendy, but it is zoned recreational and then considered a special zoning district to allow uses outside of the rec regular uses. Is
So
my
anything-
understanding.
So anything allowed in rec is allowed in snows, just
I
snows.
believe so.
Okay. So then, I don't know how in the weeds the select board needs us to get about specifying accessory versus permitted, but it seems like BC and C1 for sure, HGR and rec, it says accessory, but anything like this seems to me to be accessory.
Right.
Yeah, I would say if those are checked off on the chart, then we should be looking at those 4 zones. And then if it's in any other zone, then we should be, the selectmen should be denying the permit.
Right.
Based on-
Well, 5 zones technically with snows.
Right, with the special zoning district.
Right, right. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, maybe part of the process is just a quick communication to the select board saying these are the zones.
Do you want me to draft that, or do you want to bring the?
I mean, I could mention it on the 29th, for
Okay,
sure. Yeah.
okay. So we're good with this? We're, don't need anything else from us? We're good, okay. That is not the correct agenda. This is the agenda. So. Sorry, too many papers.
Can I ask a question while you're doing that?
Please do.
The Golden Heights / Ben Laguerre property. I understand the holdup, but my issue is the trail that goes in front of where he was gonna build the road, which is now says that trail is now temporarily moved from there, basically right next to the road. I was walking it yesterday. You know what I'm saying?
Are you talking Nelson's Path?
No.
No,
Nelson's
talking
Path.
about the-
I understand Nelson's
Along-
Path.
along Valley Road.
And what
It's a
happened
Valley
over-
Road Trail, I think.
What is it called?
Is it called Valley? Because it goes
It
right
runs
along the
right along
road.
Valley Road.
It goes
Yeah.
along the
Valley
road,
Road.
but basically the trail was up the hill. There's a little hill there, and the trail was kind of up the hill inside of where the trees were. And basically, you know what I'm saying,
Yeah, yeah.
John? basically that now is sort of a construction site. And basically what it says is the trail has been moved down basically right next to, basically on the road, next to the road.
That always was the trail, though.
No, the trail was always up the hill and
Yeah,
we skipped up there. Now it's been, what? You know what I'm saying?
yeah, I was not aware of that. Jim Mayhew did not say anything at the selectmen's meeting last night. When did they move that?
You know, John, I mean, because basically when they were there with the machine clearing, they had put ropes up and everything else. I think the ropes are still kind of there and the detour is kind of sort of there. And we're getting, hopefully, to cross-country ski season. And some of us do cross-country ski in that area. And I don't know what the situation with that Golden Heights / Ben Laguerre / whatever you want to call it area is. And that is a trail that is used.
Yeah.
I mean, hiking, you know, may be one thing, but you know, you're going to be pushing snow there and everything else in that area right next to the road. I'm not happy about walking right next to the road anyway, but I definitely want to ski it, especially when you're pushing snow onto it. I don't know if that's our problem because
No,
we
I don't, it's not a planning board issue. That would be,
I take it back.
that would be the selectman and the road agent and public safety.
Yeah, we'll look at it.
That was closed during the construction. And I'm not sure if that was intended to be closed, but we're running into this all over. So there are rights of way through these properties, but what we're running into is many of these are not defined. So the property owner has to give pathway through their property, but they can define where those locations are. And so what we're running into is we are trying not to really get into it. We really are trying to get the property owners to work it out with the resort is the ones who are maintaining these trails and working out some sort of agreement for that. But as far as it's their property, and if they want to reroute the trail, they certainly can.
No, yeah, but Dave, I think in this issue, we're talking about the road right of way, and we'll just have to talk to Jim and make sure that we're not interfering with his maintenance operation. And I think that's what Mike is asking about.
Yeah, I mean, basically where they moved it is literally right next to the road.
Yeah.
You know, they're just gonna be pushing snow right there. So,
Yeah. Yeah, that sort of thing, Mike, we'll need to clarify with the resort. And I'll work with Dave and Jim and we'll find out what's going on and why they're not up in the usual, because my understanding was that they had discontinued that trail. And they were using the trails in the national forest to get around the Moose Run subdivision, now that all of those homes had gone in. So, but let me work with the resort. I'm sorry?
Other cross-country skiers can jump in. That's a whole other trail area and a whole other trail of difficulty. That, you
No,
know,
I understand that. I understand that, but I thought that they had made other arrangements
I don't know.
on the novice end of the difficulty to try to get through there, and that they weren't going to use that trail that paralleled Valley Road. So we'll clarify that.
I don't know if this is the right place to bring it up, only because we granted the license to do it.
It's not our purview, but it's good to bring it up. So
But
that
I
the
mean,
right people
I'll be
can-
happy to jump in involvement, you know where I live and you know how to reach me. And anything you need, I'll be happy to be involved with you. To do whatever you need or exclude me, or you understand.
Great, thank you.
I spoke with Ian at the Adventure Center, and he seemed to have things under control, but I'm not sure about the area you're talking about right now. So maybe you could talk with him, Mark or Dave.
Okay.
He might be a good starting point, that's all.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay,
I don't know. I just
Yeah. No, you could.
was there the other day.
Good
Yeah.
point.
all right, thank you. So we're on to committee reports. So the town core group, correct me if I'm wrong, Mark, but we need to kind of regroup. We haven't met for a bit and waiting for the federal government's movements for knowing our budget for the road work. Now we know correctly that we're not getting anything for the road work, yes. So, but we are getting funds, the town is getting funds for other things, just, not this.
Yeah.
So, we'll be getting more active with the town core group shortly, right, Mark, just to help get, yeah, okay. That's all for that. Any questions?
I heard no money for roads.
That's what you
Right.
said, yeah,
Yeah, no money for roads.
right.
Right. I can
So-
explain it to you later.
Conservation Commission?
Yeah, so we're meeting December 13th. Again, Lisa, maybe you could come into that meeting. And Rick Vanderpool is going to be there again. We're working still on the mediation for the streams coming into the pond, so we don't have to dredge those all the time. We're still working on that. And we'll have, once he comes to that meeting, we'll have more information to the next planning board meeting. So that's about all I have at this time.
Suppose I can ask you separately. Did the cleaning of the culverts ever happen?
No. No, and that's supposed to be a town issue. I spoke with Jim and he said that they do, they are
I'm not
doing
blaming, I'm
that.
not blaming.
No, also, but I want to bring it up because I want to hold people to their promise. Ben also said that he was going to clean that out. Is he still operating that property? I don't know anymore, but.
Yes, he owns it.
Yeah,
So they were gonna clean that out also, so I don't get it. There was nothing ever done with the town of Waterville or Ben, so I don't know.
which culverts are you talking about?
All of them.
All of them.
Well, I was talking about all of them, but those specifically, you and I had talked about.
That
when
was
we walked
important
it.
because there's so much going on there that we gotta route the drain off properly. It's just, it just seems to be a mishmash to me.
I don't know. I mean, I'll be happy to work with you on whatever that is.
I'll let
It
Mark,
looks like Mark, yeah,
Yeah,
No, the culverts, that will be done. He's got a lot of infrastructure that he's going to be putting in there. When he installs the water and sewer connections and he does the subdivision roads out to Golden Heights Road, those ditch lines will be reestablished per the plan that you approved. So it is going to be a mess while he is doing the construction work, but it will be built the way that the plan was approved by the planning board.
Also, Mark, on the other side, where the single-family homes are being built, that's also an issue on that side as well.
the culverts are.
Culverts.
The culverts, yes.
When I talked to Jim about that this week, and when they build the driveway to that house, they will have to install a culvert. But again, that's what Jim told me, and I haven't personally looked at it lately, but when that site is built, they will have to establish the drainage on that side of Golden Heights as well.
When you say they, do you mean Jim? The town of
No.
Water?
The homeowner, they will
Homeowner.
have to install culvert for
That was-
that driveway.
That was
Is that-
part of the agreement to allow them to have a driveway, right?
Jim issues a driveway permit and he says what they have to put in for the culvert and all that.
Right, and when it goes down to the road, the Valley Road, that's also in bad shape down through there, which is the
And
same.
it will be in bad shape until they finish construction.
So they'll do it all
when-
the way down the road.
Yeah, I mean, I would imagine that between Jim and Dave, before we issue the certificate of occupancy, they have to meet whatever their site plan said was how it was going to be built. That's part of the permitting process of the building permit.
Okay,
So the assumption that I think I just heard is that we are expecting sometime in the foreseeable future that the Golden Heights project will be moving forward, like next spring or something.
Yes, as soon as they can construct. Yep.
Okay.
Okay. Good. Okay, any communications we should know about? Nothing? Okay. All right, so then our next meeting will be Thursday, January 13th.
Good, I won't be here.
So we will have both our regular meeting and the public hearing for the those two zoning changes.
Which you guaranteed would be very uncontroversial, right?
Oh, man.
I agree with you, by the way.
Well, hey,
We'll
start the
see.
new year off with a bang one way or another.
Indeed.
Any other issues that anyone needs to bring to the board? Just muttering over there, okay, no?
I'm just muttering that the biggest one was taking care of that trail, and the question on the culvert was
Okay, excellent.
the issues that I had.
Well, if there's nothing further, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn.
Second.
Second, all in favor?
Mike Capel, aye.
Rich, I.
Wendy, I.
John, I.
Bill, I.
Bill?
Well,
All right, thank you,
This
everybody.
is the trail.
Wendy, can you give me a call when you get a chance, please?
Yep.
Thank
I
you.
will do that shortly.
Yeah, I want to.
Thank you. That's good.
Let 'em write it down.